Welcome to HRBC show called Let's Talk. So today we have Aldo. And can you say your last name for me?
Dibelardino, the Peacemaker Sheriff.
Awesome. And he's running for sheriff in Virginia Beach. So welcome. You want to tell us a little about yourself?
Well, first and foremost, Nina, thank you for having me, and I thank your audience. I really appreciate the opportunity to communicate and speak with you, and hopefully this is an edifying experience for all of us. We can all learn a little something. That would be great. I am, as you said, a candidate for the elected sheriff position in Virginia Beach, and I want to stress to your viewers that that position is potentially the most important local office they're going to vote for this very reason. It is, by the Constitution of the state and in every state, the highest law enforcement officer in the county or in the city of Virginia Beach. And that's important because we're at a time of change in our story, if you will, biblically and otherwise. And the sheriff, particularly the elected sheriff, takes an oath to uphold the Constitution. And that involves protecting the rights, the constitutional rights for the citizens. And if I may divulge a little, I want to maybe give a little context to that. Is that okay, Nina?
Okay.
So we have what's something called natural rights, and those built on natural laws. Those are God's laws, our Creator's laws. Some people call them the laws of Mother Nature, but they're the things that exist because God created them, and He created us. And then you have what's called the common law system, which is an interpretation of that. I like to think of it as a common sense system. It's not really an appropriate way to think about it, but it's a common law. It's been built over generations, and it helps. And then from there, we have our Constitution. And our Constitution is a unique thing in the history of the world. It was a contract. It is still a contract between we, the people, that's you and I, and our government. And it was a gift to us from our founding fathers who lived under tyranny for far too long, under kings and whatnot. And they came to the United States, and through the Revolutionary War, they won their freedom. And they said, we're going to do this right. They dedicated their adventure here to God. They came for many reasons, but that was primary importance to them. That's what the 1607 project is about. And I'd encourage your viewers to look into that, because that, interestingly enough, started in Virginia Beach. And there's an effort to renew that covenant. And that, I think, part of what I'm doing builds upon that. Anyway, it's all very important. The sheriff plays a key role with our reality and how we live and interact with one another. There's a lot of things that are going on that are making people uncomfortable. A lot of things that people think should be changed and dealt with and whatnot. And we can get into a lot of that if you want. But the sheriff has, if you will, the authority to actually change our reality by doing something very simple. And that is to follow the rule of law path to restore non-government local citizen grand jury supervision. And I would like to get into that with you when you're ready. But that changes our reality from one of normalized deception and tyranny and destruction to one where we're accountable to one another. And that's how things are built in the natural sense. And that accountability gets handed off from one grand jury to the other. And by truly being accountable to one another, we can be accountable to our Creator and live in a reality where truth matters, common sense is more common and applies. And we have a future and a destiny. I like to tell people, look at the Lord's Prayer. In it, it's been prayed for thousands of years by billions of souls. Jesus told us to pray that God's will comes on earth as it is in heaven. And, that to me is a very special thing. That's a gift, and that's a path, and that's a destiny for us. And so getting back to the sheriff's important, particularly in Virginia Beach and the race that's going on. I've started this movement called peacemakersheriff.org. I am the first. I'm modeling this. I've developed this. And my oath to my voters that vote me in is that I will restore accountability in our community by restoring that non-government citizen grand jury supervision, which is the law. It's the Constitution. It's in our Supreme Court documents. I'll read some of that to you when we get to that. And that is extremely important, because once you get that in place, Nina, the grand juries can start dealing with a lot of the other issues. We live in a time when there's so many issues, it's very easy to feel overwhelmed. And you have to ask yourself, how do we change this reality? You start from the foundation, from the beginning. That's rule of law. Rule of law is best handled through the grand jury that way, where we're accountable to one another. We're not having to answer to the politics of black robes and things that happen in other places and other interests. And I want to be respectful to all people. I tell people in my writings, I've got a lot of filings we can go over if you want, in federal court and in state court and in local court. And I often say, I'm a petitioner. We all are. And back to that Lord's Prayer every day, we're to ask for God's forgiveness that we are to give to one another, and we're asked for his provision and his protection and deliverance, if you will. And I'm a humble servant, and I'm not perfect. And I'm not here to vilify any individual or any class of individuals, but I am here to create and advocate for a better path for all souls, including the ones that are doing things they should not. That's why I am a peacemaker sheriff. We have 3,143 counties and county equivalents across this great country called America. And I believe what is happening and starting here in Virginia Beach will take root, and it will roll across many, if not all, of those other counties. In fact, just last week, I was up in a rural county in Virginia speaking to a Patriots group that was representing 4 counties in their area. They're very interested in this program and want to seed it there. And it's already starting. And I've gotten calls from other states and other places. So there's a lot of exciting things happening, a lot there to digest, but it's your show. You take the reins, please.
All right. So I got a couple of questions. Are you ready for me?
Hit me.
All right. So what made you decide to run for this position?
Yes, ma'am. I've always had a deep well of faith. I've been very blessed with a great brain and resources and blessings. 4 years ago, our legal system, if you will, tried to destroy me, and I stood up to that corruption. And the more I got into it, the more I realized how many people are affected by this, and the gifts I was given. In fact, I just had this conversation with a pastor friend. I said, I realized that I couldn't walk away from it. It was like my Jonah moment. I had a different path in life. I'm an inventor, a successful business owner, and I was getting ready to start manufacturing some really great tiny houses. And this happened, and it was undeniable. And I just kept diving in from there. And as I got into it and peeled the onion more and more, I realized that it wasn't just the local, it wasn't a few, it was going throughout our system, and it needed to be dealt with. I have a background as an engineer. I've done graduate work in business studies. I've done a lot of notable things. People have written stories about me and whatnot. And I have a brain for understanding complex things. I actually have 7 global patents. And I just started digging down. And August was 4 years I've been in this fight. And it has grown tremendously. I've been very blessed and very grateful. I tell people I'm a humble servant. I get up every day, and I do what I'm compelled to do and just watch the magic happen.
Okay. So can you give us a short vision of what it would be like under your leadership?
Yeah. The sheriff we have now, and in most sheriffs are what I call administrative sheriffs. They run the jail, they run the courthouse, and they deliver the orders the court gives them. And of course, those operations are going to continue. In fact, from your questionnaire, you should know that I have building a coalition of local churches and interested parties to bring a recovery program into the Virginia Beach jail that's faith-based. It's called Celebrate Recovery Inside. I'm very excited about this. It's a national program that's had great success because it is linked to surrounding churches that support it. So there's continuity for the people in the jail to build from the growth that they encounter. There's a lot of things that talk about, the lowest, serving the lowest, and people who end up in jail. There's things that have happened in their lives willingly or unwillingly, and they're at a time when they're very vulnerable and exposed, and they're seeking, and that's a great thing. So, the jail would run with the Celebrate Recovery program. It would run more efficiently. I think it's overdue for an audit. The budget, I believe, is a little over $50 million a year. There's some very serious questions. Some of them I've outlined for you in your questionnaire. There's $8 million a year being spent on medical service contracts. I've been jailed twice for standing up for corruption in our courts and for educating the public on some of the stuff I'm going to share with you about the grand jury power and their rights. And I when I was there in the Virginia Beach jail for 3 days, I asked for medical attention and never saw anybody. Nobody responded. And at one point, one of the deputies apologized to me for how messed up the system was. But when you take that $8 million, you divide it by 365, that's $22,000 a day for a contract. The city I know has doctors on staff and nurses on staff because I was hired to become a deputy sheriff in July of 2022. In order to go through that process, I passed all their tests, physical, mental, psychological, whatnot. And the physical I did at a city building with a city doctor. So if the city has doctors on staff, why is the sheriff's department hiring that outside? Why can't they have people on staff, maybe a core team with some supplement from the outside so you can save some margins? I think there's a lot of opportunities in the budget as well. In the phone system, it's all run privately by contract, and calls are crazy expensive and they're very poor quality and they get cut off. You can spend $3 and up on a call. And I'm like, where's all that money going? There's chronic complaints about the canteen system. The jail charges you $3 a day as an inmate. And when you leave, if you owe them money, they make you sign a contract. If you know somebody who's done time in the Virginia Beach jail, they'll probably tell you they signed an agreement to repay the jail some money they owe them. So my question is, how many of those debt instruments is the jail sitting on and why? So there'd be some things that are changed in the jail operations. I think the deputies are not paid adequately given what's asked of them and the danger and risk in their job. When you look at their duties compared to the standards for Hampton Roads, as well as what some of the other government employees are paid. So I would advocate for a pretty good increase in their salary. I'd be looking to make systems more efficient. And I'd look to make sure that first and foremost, as the elected sheriff, I was protecting your constitutional rights. And as I said to you before, the foundation of that is giving you, the people, we the people, back their lawful power to their grand jury. That grand jury, when it's impaneled, has authority over the other three branches of government. So corruption problems that seem to not want to change start to go away when a grand jury gets involved and the citizens issue decrees and whatnot to get things straightened out. And that's what's missing in our reality. So honestly, your question is a great question. There's a lot that's going to change when the grand jury gets back to its lawful role. Watch out, our reality is going to take a wonderful turn, but that's also part of our destiny. The Bible speaks about justice to the nations. Our Pledge of Allegiance talks about justice for all, and that's in other writings and other inspirations. And I have combined that to say blessings and grace as we bring justice for all to the nations. And I know it might sound a little far-fetched, but it's not. It's here. It's what's happening. It's just a matter of getting a sheriff with the right heart to do the right thing, follow the rule of law, give the citizens back their power, and watch the magic that happens from there and watching it spread.
Okay. So what experiences best suit you for this role?
So Nina, I don't have law enforcement experience. I did a little bit of time, about a year in the military while I was in college. My background is in engineering. I'm a small business owner. I've been to Harvard Business School, studied business at the graduate level. So I'm bringing the outside perspective. I'm not the guy who came up through the ranks in law enforcement. And that person, it thinks the way the system is fine. And you know, I'm not going to discredit anybody for that path, but we need a change. So I am that outside change. As it relates to learning law enforcement, I have learned a lot. I would tell your viewers or followers, go to courtofpublicawakening.org. That's what this is about behind me. That website has all the legal postings I've been doing to restore this grand jury right. So they don't need to wait and see what kind of man and sheriff I'll be. They can see the proof right there. And what's going on right there is unique and it's never happened in the history of this country. And there is no bar member who would take these arguments to the Supreme Court, which I am, and the Federal Court of Appeals, and into our local courts, because they would be biting the hand that feeds them and they'd lose their jobs. So to answer your question, I'm going to learn a lot about law enforcement really quick. I'll have a lot of good people around me that can handle a lot of that, teach me that. I can handle a firearm. I can handle myself. I was a wrestler and a weightlifter, and I'm not afraid. I'm not a person of fear, but I'm bringing a much needed outside perspective. And don't take my word for it. Go to Court of Public Awakening, read some of it, watch the videos there that are posted and what's going on. I've been fighting for our rights, and I will not stop until they're restored, because I can tell you this, Nina, souls are not slaves. I'm not a slave. You're not a slave. Your viewers are not a slave, but our system is treating us that way. We have a government that exist because of you and I and the fruits of our labor and the taxes we pay in our existence. But it seems to feel like we're serving the government when in fact the government is there to serve us. And that's the change that's coming. And that's the change that will come from somebody like myself, who's an outside perspective, if you will.
Okay. Alrighty. Next question is, Virginia Beach is considered unfriendly territory for African Americans. How would you help change that perception?
First of all, let me apologize to the African American community because that's an unfortunate situation. I can tell you this. A lot of our social interaction is signaled, if you will, it's influenced. Our courts, when you look at our society as a very complex system, the courts signal and determine normal behaviors. The courts tell you what's okay and what's not. So I think the way things are run, they're being run unlawfully and corrupted for the benefit of a few and controlled. And that's adding tension into our communities. I also, on a part-time basis, drive a school bus for the city of Virginia Beach in the afternoons. I take kids home from Renaissance Academy and whatnot. And, you know, I see those students wound up with a lot of tension, and I feel for that, and I feel for them. So to answer your question, you know, I think the changes I'm going to bring and the reality and changes is going to shift things to a default that's better for everybody so that we can have more unity and less division. I think the way things are controlled now, we have a lot of separation. Nina, can I pause for a second? My cat is over my shoulder who wants to participate, but she needs to understand that this is not her interview. So would you just give me one moment, please?
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay. Next question is, do you have any thoughts on how to reduce the amount of people who return to jail repeatedly?
Yeah. Let me paint a picture for you that I hope will give your viewers a framework. You know, when we get injured physically or sometimes mentally or whatnot, we go to a hospital. A jail is a place that people end up when they've done something wrong socially, if you will. And to me, they need some help. You don't just put them in a cell and ignore them. That's not going to make things better. I mean, you know, for somebody on a substance, it could help them get dried out. But I can tell you there's drugs in our jail because when I've been in jail twice now, both times I've been exposed to illegal drugs in the jails. So it's rather unfortunate. But I think that a key to reducing the rate of people returning is not just in that sort of Celebrate Recovery program, which provides recovery continuity, but also I think in changing our reality back to one where the grand jury has authority. Because I got the sense when I was in and talking to inmates that our system is being run for the sake of control and a benefit of a few, meaning judges seem to be quick to put people in jail, and then you sit there for a while and you have to pay the canteen fees and pay money to make a phone call and whatnot. And then you really don't get shown any grace, if you will, until you hire the right attorney. And when I was discharged out of Virginia Beach Jail in October of 2023, on the 28th it was, I believe, yeah. I was discharged with two gentlemen. Both of them shared their stories with me, and both of them had the same story to say. They said, judge put us in jail. One guy had stolen a smartphone, an iPhone. Judge put him in jail. He sat there for 2 or 3 weeks until he actually came up with a few $1,000s to hire an attorney. Once he hired an attorney, they got a hearing in front of the judge, which he couldn't do on his own. And the judge reduced the charges to time served and released them. But he felt like, he was beholden in his freedom to getting an attorney. Other gentlemen had an arson issue, same story. So, to answer the question about reducing the return rate, I think there are several variables. One, getting effective help for these people that has continuity to it. Back to my model, I see the jail, if you will, as a hospital for the soul. When somebody shows up there, They're there because, as I said, they did something wrong. Maybe there's a substance abuse issue. Maybe there's a personality disorder. Maybe they had abuse in their life. Maybe they've been abusing others. Maybe there's a whole, group of issues that need to be addressed. That jail should have a menu of services that they can be provided, presuming they want to participate in that, and then provide them some continuity for when they get out to try to help them plug in with job stuff. I'm kind of tired of seeing these road crews that are cutting the grass, because I don't see that as being something that these guys can continue with. I'd like to see a program where they're being placed in small businesses that they can continue to work at once they get out with some supervision and whatnot. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there to reduce the return rate.
Okay. So you said that you have been to jail twice. Can you tell us a little bit about those times?
Yes, ma'am. On October 25th of 2023, I stood up to corruption in our courts. I had filed a federal complaint against 6 judges and 4 attorneys, and had documented what they call fraud upon the court, which means somebody lies to the court, and you can prove they lied to the court by showing them statements or documents or transcripts and whatnot. And the judge was a retired judge, Mr. Randall Smith, and on the record that hearing, he acknowledged the federal complaint, acknowledged that there was what they call a capias order. It's a civil warrant for your arrest. It was placed because a certain attorney who had deceived the court, a Mr. Tusano, had lied to the court about some money matters. And I provided the court the evidence to prove that he lied. And so there was then documented fraud upon the court, and I filed complaints against that behavior, which were ignored by the state bar and the court itself. And, the judge basically said, I'm putting you in jail. And I got him on the record, and I said, Your Honor, you've admitted on the record that there's a federal complaint pending for this, that there's fraud upon the court in the order to jail me, but you're still going to jail me. He said, Sir, I have to jail you because if I don't, there'll be chaos in society. And that was the first time they put me in jail. And by the way, at that time, I notified the sheriff's department and asked them in my notice, what is your policy, your department policy for enforcing known orders that contain fraud upon the court? And I got no response. Now, you need to understand something, Nina. The sheriff has separate constitutional authority than the court. The judges aren't the sheriff's boss, but the sheriff, what we currently have, those administrative sheriffs, they seem to think that. The sheriff should have stood up for me and said to the court, there's something wrong here because this gentleman has brought evidence that shows fraud upon the court, and the court's normal mechanism of stopping this isn't working. So the sheriff should have stepped in and said, you need to sort this out. This guy shouldn't be in my jail. He's got evidence to show he shouldn't. But nonetheless, none of that happened. I went to jail. And when that happened, I made a commitment in my heart to run for the sheriff's position. And God has just opened doors left and right as a way to change things, because I realized that the culture that's in place isn't going to change that, because the system has been run for generations that way. And these guys think this is normal. It's not. It's unlawful. It's very easy. I can show you some of this, and I will. The second time I was jailed happened more recently, happened on July 19th, 2024. There's a video of it at my sheriff's website, peacemakersheriff.org. Your viewers can watch it. I was sitting out in front of our courthouse with 2 ladies with these signs. I was educating the public about the power of our grand jury to restore accountability. I was also surveying or polling the citizens walking from the parking lot to and from the jail about how they were being treated by our courts, which is something called due process. That's in our Constitution. You have a right to be treated fairly and respectfully. And I was also protesting the fact that Victor Jackson was sitting in the jail because 4 days prior to that, on the 15th of July, we went in as a group, a citizens group, with a lawful presentment of evidence of corruption in the Virginia Beach courts and government to give to the grand jury. And the judge put Victor in jail for 10 days. The sheriffs acted so terribly, 6 of them or 7 of them in there, trampled people in the courtroom, injured a couple of people, falsely arrested a 65-year-old woman, carried me out of the courtroom for trespassing and threw me out of the building. It was just a mess. And they refused lawful Freedom of Information Act request to give us that videotape. There is a videotape of similar actions, a little less violent, on the 1st of July. That's at Court of Public Awakening. I hope your viewers will take the opportunity to look at it. But on the 19th, I was standing up for our grand jury rights and educating people. I was doing it in a spot that was 152 feet from the courthouse doors. I went back and measured it. It was a spot that a deputy sheriff had told us was okay for us to be in protest. In fact, earlier the day before, there was a group of Jehovah's Witnesses just not too far from us doing their own presentation, and they never got bothered. But they came out and they arrested me. They used something called a administrative directive. Turns out that it seems that that's unlawful. I have a group of white hat legal experts that are advising me, and so there's a hearing coming up about that soon. And it's just been a mess. It's a typical battle between the status quo versus a change. But what people need to understand is the status quo isn't operating lawfully. It's very unlawful. It's very black and white. Citizens need to understand it's a path to changing our reality. So those are the 2 times I've been arrested so far. I did not want to go to jail. That's what happened. And I will continue to stand up for what's right.
Awesome. Okay. So if elected, what are your top 3 things you're going to hit the ground running with?
Oh, boy. Well, the grand jury is going to immediately go back to non-government citizen supervision. That is going to change a lot of things. The jail is going to get a Celebrate Recovery Program team of outside supporting churches are going to come in. They're also going to offer a program for the staff and deputies as well, a separate program. And we're going to audit everything going on in that jail. And we're going to look for ways to make that jail efficient. I'd like to get the deputies a meaningful raise, maybe a 10% raise or something along those lines. And we're going to be true servants of the citizens, which is the role of the sheriff. If you look at it historically, you're elected as a sheriff, you're accountable to the people, you're there to protect the people. And the means to do that is the grand jury. You're not the bulldogs for the judges like they're acting now. And you take an oath to uphold the Constitution. So those are 3 big areas that you'll see right out of the gate. In fact, as I said, don't wait. Go to Court of Public Awakening. See what I'm already doing. You don't need to wait to see what Aldo Peacemaker Shelf Aldo's going to do. You can see what he's already doing and how serious it is. Yesterday, the Federal Fourth Circuit Court of Appeal docketed my open petition to grant us access to our grand jury. My understanding of how our Supreme Court works is the Fourth Circuit is assigned to the chief judge at the Supreme Court, and he's going to see that document. So you're going to start seeing sparks flying out of the Virginia Beach courthouse because now the feds are involved at the highest level.
Okay. So those are all the questions that I have. Is there anything else you would like to tell the people?
Nina, I have in front of me, Judge Scalia wrote an opinion in 1992 in a case called the Williams case. And this case elaborates a lot of what I'm talking about. It's on the website, but I'd like to go over this with you and see if any of your viewers have some questions. So I think it's really important. May I do that?
All right, go ahead.
So on page 68 of the Williams case, I'm going to read from you, quote, "The grand jury is not merely an investigatory body. It also serves as a, quote, protector of citizens against arbitrary and oppressive governmental actions." And in that quote, he's referencing a 1974 case called the Calandra case. So you have double jeopardy there on saying, look, this grand jury has a role of protecting citizens from unlawful or inappropriate government actions. And I can imagine that many of your viewers feel and have felt that and say, hey, we need a little balance here with what's going on in the government, or a lot of balance. So let me go on backwards to page 47. And this is about a 40-page document. You can pull it up online. There are links to it on our site. It'll put you to sleep, but I'm going to read you the highlights. So the grand jury is an institution separate from the courts, over whose functioning the courts do not preside. No such supervisory judicial authority exists. The grand jury is mentioned in the Bill of Rights, but not in the body of the Constitution. It has not been textually assigned, therefore, to any of the branches described in the first 3 articles. It is a constitutional fixture into its own right. That means we have a judicial branch, we have a legislative branch, and an executive branch, and then you have the grand jury over here. And the grand jury, when it's impaneled and it's sworn in, has authority over the other branches. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. It's a loop, a feedback loop, to deal with Major issues, not little issues, not their chickens are making noise at the wrong hour. The courts handle that. When you have major problems that are not being addressed, a group of currently under current Virginia law, which is not lawful, when 5 or more citizens bring those grievances to the court's supposed to impanel a grand jury, and I filed some of those, but our courts aren't following it. I want to show you something. This book I have in front of me is the Handbook for Virginia Grand Jurors, and in it, they talk about the importance of the grand jury from one of its early, and this is on under Section 5. One of its earliest functions was to protect citizens from despotic abuse of power by the king. So our grand jury will act as that protector that we need, and we need it desperately now so we can get through a lot of the issues, whether they're border issues, whether they're monetary policy issues, whether they're corruption issues, you name it. That's the means to handle that. Now, I want to caution your readers. Some people have heard the statement, oh, a grand jury, you can indict a ham sandwich with a grand jury. I don't know if you've heard that or not, Nina, but the way the grand jury is being misrun by our courts, they deceive the grand jury into getting a false indictment, and they use it as a tool. There are several cases going on right now. One is the Laura Hughes case, the local case, where she was falsely indicted, and they used it to destroy her reputation, and now she's got to fight her way out of a bag. And remember, I just read to you from a Supreme Court document from Judge Scalia. That's what they call black letter law. It's undeniable that the grand jury is supposed to be separate from the court, yet what I'm showing you is this 16, 20-page document issued by the Supreme Court of Virginia that the Virginia Beach Circuit Court's using, and it's a handbook for grand jurors because the court is running our grand jury. They're not supposed to. The people run the grand jury. And I'll tell you why when I get further into the next little piece I want to read to you. It talks about laymen, and it talks about the historical role of the grand jury institution in which laymen conduct their inquiries unfettered by technical rules. It's a forum for the citizens who have a grievance to come together to discuss the problem privately. So there's another thing about the grand jury that gets abused. It's just, oh, grand juries are secret. They're secret. What's presented to a grand jury is public. You need to know that. It needs to be on the record so you know they're not being deceived. When the jurors are ready to deliberate or talk about the matter, then they're sequestered into a private room guarded by a sheriff, and there they can talk freely among themselves privately. That's not how the court is misrunning the system that they shouldn't be running to begin with. And so what that does is it takes away that voice from the layman. And so we need to get back to that. So we're often told, Nina, that we have power. You have power, and you do. But it comes from unity when there's agreement between multiple souls, husband and wife, and Holy Spirit, the Trinity. In a grand jury, it's 4 or more is unity. But the courts won't allow it because they're afraid of it. And what's going to happen when things change, and I say this with respect because there needs to be a heavy dose of grace, but these officials who've been doing things wrong for so long and they know it are afraid that they're going to get indicted by their neighbors for their bad actions. And some of that will happen. I'm hopeful that their neighbors will apply an abundant amount of grace towards them. But nonetheless, things need to change. They will change. The sheriff has authority. The sheriff election in Virginia Beach at this time is probably one of the most important things in the local elections for sure. The peacemaker sheriff movement that I have put together is meant to model what I'm doing so that other sheriffs can follow suit. Across the great country of America, we have 3,143 county or county equivalents, and each one of those counties needs, deserves, and shall have a peacemaker sheriff who will truly protect the citizens' constitutional rights by giving them that authority to do it themselves through their grand jury rule of law authority for them supervising their own grand juries. That is a fact. That's what's coming. It's just a matter of what the transition looks like. The status quo does not want to let their hands off the levers of power, but not for their fears that they will be themselves. My comment to them out of respect and love is to seek grace, to come forward, confess, and let's all move forward and for a better path, even for those who did wrong. because we're not destined to be living in this perpetual reality of destruction, deception. You can't keep up with the monetary policy and the inflation. The medical systems are so complicated, and expensive, and people fighting constantly about school content and whatnot. It's not our destiny. That's not God's will on earth as it is in heaven. To me, that sounds like the opposite, and that's not where we're destined to be, not where we should be going.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you coming to the show and sharing your views and policies and thoughts.
Thank you, Nina. I'm available to answer any questions that you and your audience have. I hope that your group will seriously consider what I presented and what I represent and make their decisions accordingly. I would love to count their endorsement. Just last week, we picked up some major endorsers. I attended an event in Purcellville, Virginia. We picked up virginiachristian.org. We picked up an organization called BRR USA. It's a group of pastors that has historical significance. During the Revolutionary War, the pastors led their flocks to fight for their natural rights, the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness thing, because it's a biblical thing and it's an inalienable right that government was taking away from them at the time, just as we're seeing it being diminished now. So this BRR stands for Black Robe Regiment organization. It's got a beautiful long history. They're very well respected. They're endorsing what I'm doing and we're coordinating our actions. As I said, there's a plan in place to try to create a reality where we have 3,143 peacemaker sheriffs. And then there were a couple other organizations that signed up that are on the sheriff's page. So we're building momentum. And I just say it's because we're humble servants. We're standing for truth. We're not taking no. We're not backing down. We're being respectful and lawful. I tell people everything we do is first and foremost lawful. Second of all, it's coordinated. We never do anything individually. We seek unity among the group, and then we act in a coordinated manner. It's liberty-minded, meaning we're seeking our liberties, and we have those rights naturally and otherwise constitutionally. And then it's action-oriented. You have to do something. I had somebody say something to me today that was very relevant. They said, Aldo, you can't vote your way out of tyranny. It takes more than just voting. It takes action. It takes prayer. It takes activism. History has taught us many things, Nina. One of them from the Revolutionary War was that there was really 3 to 5% of the population that was active. The rest just sort of sat it out and said, I don't want any part of this. And I think that that's a modern thing. You get a small percentage of very well organized, determined souls, and you can change your reality. And that's what this is about. That's what I believe is here. As I told you, blessings and grace as we bring justice for all to the nations.
Awesome. Well, thanks again and wish you the best of luck.
I thank you and I appreciate you and your audience. I'm sorry that at the mayor sheriff forum I couldn't be present. It was short notice and the communications weren't the best. Nonetheless, we did the best we could. I look forward to interacting with your group. Here, happy to answer any questions. I think we all deserve more unity, more peace, more grace, and I think that that's what's coming. It's just a matter of, what does that transition process look like? And I think that once the deep thinkers get involved, I think we can find, a lawful transition that gets us to a better reality. And it's interesting enough, it's starting in Virginia Beach, which if you understand Virginia Beach's history, when the settlers came from England, before they went up to Jamestown, they landed on the beach here at Fort Story or Cape Story, if you want, and they put a cross in the ground and they thanked God for his delivering them and his blessing, and they dedicated their adventure. They kind of started a covenant. There's a 1607 covenant renewal program that's going on. They're supporters as well. What I'm doing is a continuation of what they're doing. We believe that through the restoration of the grand jury authority to the citizens across all those counties, we will see a renewal of our covenant relationship. We'll see a lot of issues in our communities get addressed and turn in a direction where people feel and know the power they have because they're accountable to their neighbor. And here's something to keep in mind. History has taught us that absolute power absolutely corrupts. We knew that from the kings from many years ago. They came here, and now we're in another situation where it's like, okay, we've got elected officials who seem to do what they want. They're not accountable. We've got judges who you file complaints against, and then nothing happens. And so we're back to where we started, where there's a few controlling the many, and it seems very unfair. And the reality is that somebody has to be in charge. Somebody has to have sort of the highest authority. And the grand jury is who that is. When they are impaneled and they are charged, they have that authority in a very certain set of issues that are being brought to them. And of course, their authority has to fit within the boundaries of natural law, it's God's law, the common law that we agree that makes sense, the common sense stuff, and the Constitution. And, with that grand jury has authority over the other branches. It takes some action or decision to address the concern or issues of the citizens in that county or that jurisdiction. And then that grand jury is discharged and it goes back into the fabric of their community. And then another grand jury, because another issue comes up, is impaneled. So what happens is that absolute power is like a baton that gets handed from one grand jury to the next. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because at some point you'll serve on that grand jury and you will do your duty in it. And you'll realize that you're accountable to your neighbors and they'll be accountable to you at some time. And there isn't one person who can ignore the will of the people. It is the people being accountable to the people. And I believe when we get into that reality, we will then be truly accountable to our Creator. And I think you'll see a lot of wonderful things start to happen. I want to leave you with, from the Handbook of Virginia Grand Jurors, in section 4, they talk about the importance of the grand jury. And I got a little highlighted part. It says, jury service is one of the highest duties of citizenship, for by it the citizen participates in the administration of justice between man and between government and the individual. In time of peace, a citizen can perform no higher public duty than that of grand jury service. No body of citizens exercises public functions more vital to the administration of law and order. So, it is very serious. Most people aren't aware of it. Don't be ashamed of that. I went to some wonderful schools, got some great educations, didn't know about this until it kind of forced its way into my reality, and I learned to be the humble servant. And after I got spit up on the beach like Jonah, I just said, yes, Lord, show me the next step. And so I'm here to tell your viewers, look into it. Don't take my word for it. Do your own research, replay the video, see what I say. Go to Court of Public Awakening, read some of the filings. Everything there is open source. Other people are copying it in other counties, putting their names on it, changing their little details a little bit. That's what it's designed to do. It's a movement. It's designed to give us a better reality, and it's here.
Awesome. All right, then. Thanks again. Good luck.
Thank you, Nina. Great night.